All right. Hey, everyone. I am Thomas, and this is Morgan. She should have introduced herself.
This is the first episode of Love and Movies podcast, which is basically about us, Thomas and myself. We are a couple going on 4.5 years together.
5 years.
Um, Almost five.
January 1st.
Yep. Um, and we both really like movies. Obviously, being two different people, we like different kinds of movies. Sometimes we like the same movies. So we are going to basically talk movies, new movies, past movies, maybe even upcoming movies.
Movies.
Yep. So
So,
that is a breakdown of what you guys are going to get here. Thank you for listening, first of all.
hopefully, you enjoy it. Obviously, we have two different types of personalities, so we're going to essentially run the whole gambit. Morgan is a big Disney movie fan, anything Disney related, especially the older stuff. And I am more action, comedy, horror, and everything else in between. So between the two of us, we run pretty much the full gambit. And so we'll put our each individual perspectives on it, and hopefully it'll be entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's going to kind of be interesting about us doing the podcast is a little history to us. One of the first things we did while we were dating was watch each other's favorite movies and get to know each other through movies. So this will definitely be an interesting journey as we talk all these different odd movies.
Yes. And we will probably go back through and watch our favorite movies again with each other and then like do a podcast on that just so that way we can be like, oh, and I forgot to tell you this is why I like that movie and it's one of my favorites. And you know, and if
Yeah.
you guys have any reviews that you want us to watch together where you know either one of us haven't seen, we'll more than happy to take a look at it and see what happens.
Yeah, we do have an email. You guys can email us at loveandmoviespod@gmail.com. And is spelled out. So any suggestions, go ahead and shoot us an email. And basically, so what we're going to start with on the first episode is kind of what we're doing right now. Like Thomas said, I am a Disney nerd. I love Disney movies. I love animated movies. I love the romantic comedies and dramas and historical period movies. Um, Whereas Thomas likes comedies and action and horror. So, what we did in a conversation, we're coming up on Halloween, and Halloween is actually my favorite holiday, but I don't like horror movies. So, I have begrudgingly decided to watch some horror movies.
Yeah. And I of course was like, let's do this because I love horror movies. There's something about a good horror movie that just like makes me happy. I don't know why. So
Yeah, we Thomas immediately got on our TV, got into I don't know even what streaming service, and had a boyish grin on his face as he tried to figure out what movie we were going to start with.
yeah, I asked like a whole bunch of questions too because I was like, okay, so do you want to watch like a ghost type movie? Do you want to watch a slasher? Do you want to watch old school, new school? I mean, like what and she's like, I have no idea. Just pick something. And I was like, well,
Well, I think my only stipulation was I don't want bloody gory, so that
yeah.
leaves out no slasher flicks.
I mean, there's some slasher flicks that you've watched though. Like you've watched the really I can Scream series, which is slasher, so
Yeah.
not really horror, more slasher. You've seen I made you watch the original Nightmare on Elm Street like
Yeah.
a long time ago. Um and you've seen other stuff without me previously, but it's not like obviously your go-to stuff. But we definitely you said no Saw because Saw is like extreme. So, and I was like, that's fine. I'll watch Saw by myself, so I'm not too worried about it.
Plus, I feel
Um,
like the newer slasher flicks are more bloody gory.
oh yeah, they definitely have stepped it up significantly because I remember watching the first Saw, and it was pretty heavy at that time frame, but it wasn't like over the top crazy. Then when I watched Saw 2, it was just like, oh yeah, they are definitely stepping this up.
They're up in their game.
Yeah. But anyway, so the first movie that we decided to watch in the horror-a-thon was The Conjuring, and the original Conjuring. So first, I was thinking maybe we should do it in uh, chronological order, so based off of year, not when they came out, but year of the
Within the
year of
storyline.
within the storyline. So
Yeah.
I was first thinking, oh, we should watch The Nun, and I was like, no, I don't want to watch The Nun first because it doesn't really get you into who the characters are, like who is actually like what The Conjuring is based off of, because it's obviously Ed and Lorraine Warren. If anyone's familiar with those, they're two legitimate people. May they rest in peace. They passed away a couple of years ago. Well, more than a couple of years ago for Ed. But anyway, um,
Tangent.
uh, yeah. So essentially, I was like, I think we should watch The Conjuring first because I felt like out of all of them, The Conjuring was a lot scarier than, like, say, The Nun, um, and like Annabelle and all those things. Because, like, I felt Annabelle is like super creepy in a way, but not the same. So I was like, let's watch The Conjuring. Let's get an introduction to who Ed and Lorraine are, what they're about, and essentially then we'll backtrack. And so that's what we did. And I figured it would be a great idea to start a podcast because I was like, oh, well, we can do this podcast based off of that. And then she's like, well, why don't we just do all movies? We both love movies. And I was like, sure. So let's talk The Conjuring
Yep.
and
And
how Morgan felt about it.
I do want to say we have watched paranormal ghost hunter shows. So we both knew who Ed and Lorraine Warren were, their work and what they've done as far as in the paranormal research world. So I do think that you did pick a good one to start off with because at least I knew who some of the main characters were based on.
Yeah. And obviously, like, there's so many different. Because we were talking about it, and I was like, "Oh, we can do the Conjuring series. We could do Saw universe. We could. There's so many universes: Nightmare on Elm Street, Jason, Friday the 13th, Halloween. Um, gosh, there's so many different uh, universes out there that I figured that would be the best starting place, just because one, it is a true horror, not slasher movie. Um, Two, it it sort of falls in line with what we both sort of like watching the ghost hunters and the those things on TV. Um, and overall, it's a good movie. It is a good, well done horror movie in my eyes.
Right. Which, so when we watched it, you obviously have seen it before.
Yeah, that was
Um,
my second or third time watching it, if I'm not mistaken.
and obviously my first time. To just kind of give you guys a background, it came out in 2013, based in the 70s. Like I said, about paranormal investigators Lorraine and Ed Warren. Um, and this is actually kind of the synopsis that I found online. Um, Ed and Lorraine Warren are summoned to the home of Carolyn and Roger Perrone. The Perrones and their 5 daughters have recently moved into a secluded farmhouse where a supernatural presence has made itself known. Though the manifestations are relatively benign at first, events soon escalate in horrifying fashion especially after the Warrens discover the house's macabre history.
I don't think it's benign at first. Like the very first spoiler, heavily spoilers.
Yeah, if
Um,
you guys haven't seen this movie and don't want spoilers,
Probably not better. Listen to
yeah,
this.
we are not a spoiler. We're not going to be a spoiler free
Yeah,
podcast.
unfortunately, and it's been out since 2013, so it's been out for 10 years. So
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it, that's on you. Anyway, so spoiler, like once the so it's based in Rhode Island. They moved to Rhode Island, the Perone family, and essentially the first night they're there, the dog is barking and he doesn't want to go into the house. I don't know, red flag number one, right? And then the next day, the dog wakes up dead. That is not benign.
Okay, the dog. Wait, the dog does not wake up dead.
I
The
mean, he just
family
the
wakes
family
up,
wakes up. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
actually, like the little one of the little girls discovers the dog dead. Which
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's a red flag. My very first night in a new house, and my dog is dead. I would be booking it out of that house like super quick.
Yeah, I mean that's not benign. Like I don't know why they said benign, but either
Yeah,
way. So okay, so obviously, uh, rough start on the very first night. So what did you think of the movie? Like obviously, I liked the movie. I thought it was great. We'll talk about my opinion afterwards. I want to get your opinion first, and we could talk more about like scenes and like what happened and all of that stuff.
I mean, definitely scary movie. Um,
On a
it
on a scary scale, how would you rate it? Like let's do like 1 to 5 ghosts. One being like Donald Duck trick or treating, and 5 being like I will never ever watch that again because I had to pee myself. That it was that scary.
3.
So pretty scary.
Yeah,
I'd say pretty scary.
yeah. Um, like, would I watch it again? Yes, but not but because you wanted to watch it again. I don't I feel like with all of these movies, none of them I'm going to be like, "Ooh, yeah, I really want to watch them again," just because it's not my vibe. Um so I mean, yeah, it was scary because it's always scary when you don't see the villain. You know, things are touching you or you see something in the corner, but as the movie watcher, you don't see anything. You just see somebody getting sucked into the basement, or, you know, somebody's leg is getting touched while they're sleeping. And you're just like, there's no bad guy to watch out for. So you never know what's going to happen.
So what was your favorite scene? Like what was like, oh,
That's
that was
favorite scene. Like, none of them are
yeah.
my favorite scenes. It's not like, you know, oh, I love this part. Like, that's like a wrong question to ask. It's
No
more like,
way.
what was the like scariest scene?
Okay, so I actually have a favorite scene
Go
if
ahead and
you
say it.
want to be straightforward. So, like, my favorite scene in that movie is essentially when the mother, the praying, I can't remember her name, the mother goes down the stairs when they first get into the house because and they find the basement.
Which is
Um,
Carolyn Perone, played by Lily Taylor.
yes. Um, so when Carolyn goes down the basement stairs, first thing, I think it was like first thing in the morning, because she like hears something or something sort of draws her down there. And so she goes down there and she's like looking for something and sort of like okay, what's going on sort of thing. And like, okay, well, I'm going back upstairs. And then as she walks back upstairs, she gets hit in the face with the door because the door just slams right in her face, right? And obviously it was the spirit haunting it. But in most horror movies, if that happens, it never actually like either touches the person or it's like they're walking away or they're doing something different, like, so this was crazy. Like when I first saw that scene a long time ago, I was like, oh my god, the door hit her in the face, like, oh my god, like that's crazy, like I would have freaked out and kicked the door down and just ran out. But like, so that's my favorite scene. Every time I watch that, I'm like, damn. It's such a good scene.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't say favorite scene.
Okay, so what was your scariest scene?
Um, I mean, I definitely think like any of the times when they're getting flung across the room is pretty scary because, like I said, you don't see who's grabbing and flinging somebody across the room.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would say like that was the scariest, and then like the creepiest was when the youngest daughter like is sleepwalking and she keeps going to the one like armoire and hitting her head.
Oh yeah.
Like
So
that's probably one of the creepiest parts.
so you didn't think it was super scary when like they were in the bedroom and hearing all the noise and everything that the two younger siblings, the daughters, and like the camera's zoomed in on them, and then like it looks to the armoire, there's nothing, and then it looks back to them, and they're like, "Oh my god!" And then all of a sudden it pans up to the top, and the creepy witch lady thing is up on top of the armoire and jumps on the sister and
Oh
starts
yeah,
like.
yeah, 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 yeah,
You didn't think
yeah.
that was scary,
No, that
or
was scary. I think I purposely
you
blanked that
blocked
out
it
of my
out?
head so I don't have nightmares.
I mean, I even jumped at because, like, watching it, like, obviously I've seen it a couple times, but you tend to forget stuff if you haven't seen it regularly. Even I was sort of like, oh, and you even heard me like, oh shit, I forgot about that scene, you
Yeah.
know.
I
So
mean, just so you guys know, like I definitely like I had a blanket to cover my face and like I was total wuss scaredy cat. Um and I will be like that probably for every horror movie that we watch is there's got to be have to be something to cover my face, a blanket, my shirt, something.
I'm surprised you didn't
Um
wear your orange shirt. You said you were gonna, or your orange sweater you were gonna wear, your scaredy
um
cat sweater.
yeah, so I actually have if a sweatshirt that I actually recently got. We live in North Carolina and there's an amusement park called Carowinds, and for Halloween it's called Scarewinds. And this year they have a sweatshirt. It's bright Halloween orange, and there is a little cat on the back, and it's a scaredy cat on it. So the joke was that I would wear that um, today, and I just forgot. So
Plus, you do like the sweater. It's not like you got it just because it said scaredy cat. You actually do like it. You like wearing it. It's comfy sweater, all that
yeah,
stuff too.
yeah.
So,
Um,
uh,
but yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good movie. The fact that it's based on true events, I think definitely adds to the scare factor because like you're watching this and the whole time you're like somebody actually like in real life went through this. This is not, screenwriters imaginations and creating a tale. Like people actually went through this and that
yeah.
just like adds to the scare factor.
Well, I mean, obviously there's some embellishments and things of that and artistic nature, of course. But yeah, there was a full family. They even show pictures at the end of both Ed and Lorraine Warren and the Perone
Perone
family.
family.
So like you can actually see who these folks are, and like they're legitimate people. They are not made up by any stretch. They have case files of case files of case files of all the stuff that they've done in the paranormal society realm. They're actually the founders of what is it, New England um,
I can
Paranormal
never remember.
Society,
Yeah.
which is one of the oldest paranormal societies in New England, from my understanding. I should know because I'm from up in that area. Uh, but the whole instance is that like obviously this potentially could happen to another family, right? Like it's not something that is without the realm of reason. Obviously, take everything with a grain of salt. There's entertainment factor. Well, things may have been, heightened just to make it more, you know, media friendly, or not media friendly, but more media based and entertainment based. But there's obviously some truth behind it, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, you definitely know something's going on. I mean, like, for me, like, when they showed the tree in the backyard that was like in front of the lake or pond or creek or whatever the body of water was behind the house, like, you knew something happened at that tree just because of how like ugly and creepy the tree was. So then you knew at some point, okay, they're going to figure out what happened. Something happened at that tree and they're going to explain it. And when they explained the backstory that it was a witch who has sacrificed her own child within 7 days of the child being born, and then kills herself by hanging herself on that tree and then cursing the land, it's just like, whoa.
But I mean, they also said that she was related to one of the people who were murdered in the Salem witch
Salem
trials.
witch trials, yeah.
Yeah, so it was about that same time frame. So that's why she was sort of like also super quick to do it as well, because it was like her family member got murdered up there, then she had her child, and then within 7 days, like it was fairly quick. So obviously something, you know. But either way, that's, and that in itself is extremely disturbing. And that's, they also explained why they did it, why she did it in the movie, because they were saying that witches apparently do that as the ultimate slight against God, sort of thing.
Well, I mean, it
So
was also like, it's a sacrifice to the devil, and
yeah,
it was power. Like, like, one line that Lorraine Warren says is when she's explaining everything to the mom is she's like, you know, this woman did not see her newborn as a person, as her child. It was, a thing to be sacrificed. And it's like, that's just a crazy thought. Um, that anybody can look at a human life in that way is just scary in and of itself.
yeah. I mean, there's definitely like, so that's why, like, I enjoy movies, horror movies that have like multiple facets to it. That it's not just like complete jump scares. It's not just like one aspect where it's just blood and gore, but it's got a well-rounded um, horror elements to it. It's got some psychological elements to it. It's got some, jump scares. It's got some, blood and guts. It's got some of essentially everything that you can think of. And that's why I think The Conjuring, even though it's a PG-13 movie, it's still well done because it has these elements all over the table, because there's some jump scares, there's some psychological things, because you're like, oh shit, this woman who was a witch, you know did these crazy things to her family, and then it keeps going down the rabbit hole, sort of thing, and you're sort of like, oh, like what else is going to happen, so you're thinking about it, so that psychological factors there. There is some blood and guts. Obviously you talked about the dog dying or being murdered.
But it wasn't
um
really bloody gory when they showed the dog. Like,
no, no.
so I mean, if anybody's watching and hasn't seen the movie and is like me and doesn't like bloody gory, I wouldn't put The Conjuring in like a bloody gory
No,
category.
I think the worst thing that they showed was when the sheriff got his cheek bitten
Yeah.
and ripped off, and you saw that briefly. But outside of that, it wasn't like it wasn't like a Saw thing, or like the Exorcism or Exorcist, where they're puking up blood everywhere, and projectile blood flying through the screen, and people are covered in it. Think like the Evil Dead type
Yeah.
movies, which I love the Evil Dead, so I'm okay with that stuff. But Morgan would have been out
Mm-mm.
of the room. She'd be like, "Nope, can't do it. Bye."
Yeah, no.
So
Um and like one other thing that like was kind of like you kept wondering what was going to happen is every time the mom Carolyn woke up, she had bruises on her body. And it's kind of like, okay, why does she have the bruises? How is this going to be explained in the film? Like, who is giving her these bruises? Is she sleepwalking and running into things? Like, what's going on? Um, like, I thought that was kind of like an extra, like, facet of it that, like, just kind of added to the look at all this stuff that's going on in this house.
So, outside of the horror elements, would you say that you were drawn into the movie? Like, it did a very good job of creating this world and you wanted to know more of what was going on?
Yes, that's why, like, this, like, I'm okay with this kind of movie because of, like, what you said. It's not just a slasher. It's not just one thing. It's multi-dimensional, and, like, I wanted to know what was happening to the family, like, what how are they going to be saved? Are they going to be saved? All of that. So I mean, not that we've watched a lot of horror movies so far, but this being like the first one to kind of introduce me to the whole Conjuring universe, like, I'm okay with this movie.
Yeah.
Like,
So, we have watched two other movies. We did watch The Nun and we did watch The Nun 2 um, afterwards, and we're going to do a full podcast on those. Um, but just to see a reaction, a sort of thing. Like, obviously, and I said that The Conjuring was scarier than any other movie within the Conjuring universe. Would you agree after watching The Nun and The Nun 2? Would you say that's a fair statement?
yeah, I would say I was, well, I jumped more, and, like, we'll get into more details when we talk about the Nun, 1 and 2. I definitely jumped more watching the two Nun movies. Um but I was a little bit more pulled into, like, the scare factor and, like, what's going on with the Conjuring.
Gotcha.
Um
So,
yeah.
like, my thought process is that, like, I've seen a whole bunch of different styles of scary movies, right? And obviously, they're fun to me. But what makes a great horror movie, and I think The Conjuring is pretty up there, even though it's not like in your face. It's very subtle, it's essentially almost like it's slow drawing because like at the very beginning, like they introduce Ed and Lorraine, and they're showing them doing an exorcism, and then they slowly go into this um, the house, and of course it's like a steady draw, right? There's these events that are happening, but they're not so over the top where you're just like, what the hell? They're very subtle, they're very slow. You don't know what's truly going on, and you're sort of making these like conscious thoughts about what may potentially be going on, right? So obviously they get to the house, the dog dies, and you're like, well, why did the dog die? Well, obviously, because it's a horror movie, you're like, well, obviously something happened to the dog. The bad thing happened to the dog. But it's not like so over the top where you're like, oh, yeah, that dog was definitely, going to get it right off the bat. You were
Well,
just
I
sort of
mean,
like,
one thing that was good, is before, Ed and Lorraine Warren even meet the Perone family, they get sent to another house and investigate it, and they're like, okay, well, the noise is, you hear this pipe, you hear this squeaky board, it's your house. Like, your house isn't haunted, there's nothing wrong, it's a logical explanation. Which kind of helps because you realize, like, they're not going to every single house to be like, oh yeah, it's haunted, it's this, it's that. Like, they legit try to find a logical reasoning, um, for what these people are hearing and seeing. Um, so of course, they walk into the Prone family house hoping or thinking that there's a logical explanation, but of course, we already have been told that Lorraine is a clairvoyant. So like the minute she walks in, she does see, like, I think she called it like a dark entity on the husband and then around the kids. And it's like, okay, like they didn't want to see this, but they know, okay, this is legit haunted. We need to help these people.
But and also at the same time though, that's when things start ramping up at the same time though. Like prior to that, it was very subtle things, like whispering and like subtle things like the game that they played, the clap game, hide and clap, right? So essentially the kids, they introduced this game where it's like hide and seek, but instead of um, them hiding, they say, hey, clap. So think Marco Polo but on land, right? And then the little girl wants to play with the mom, and very subtly, like, she hears these claps and she goes to find them, but she doesn't realize that it's not her daughter who's doing the clapping. And it's very subtle, it's very drawn in. So it's not like you see these events and all of a sudden, like, people are flying through the air because the ghost is like slamming them against the wall, sort of thing. That doesn't happen until like the chapter 3, essentially, in the movie. Because like, when I look at movies, I do it based off of chapters, right? Chapter 1, introduction, introducing the characters. Chapter 2, the draw in, you get to learn more, you're figuring things out. Chapter 3 is the peak or the pinnacle where all the excitement happens, and then chapter 4 is the end and everything's calming back down, right? So based off of that, at chapter 3 is what they did, what they're supposed to do. Everything's going full tilt, you know and that's what made, I think it made it really good. Because like, there's some movies that you watch and it's like the second it starts, it's going, you know people are dying, people are getting killed, the houses are magically going on fire, all those things.
Yeah, but also like you kind of make it sound like all the ramping up didn't happen until the Warrens got there, which that's not really the case. Like they had the mom locked in the basement, the spirit locked the mom in the basement, and then the spirit, like, that was the scene you were talking about where they
Yeah, yeah,
the jumped off the armoire and like attacked the oldest daughter.
yeah. But
So I mean,
it was a steady progression though. It wasn't like those things initially happened like right once they moved into the house. It was like very very slow, gradually. Because like, the dog died, they're like, oh, why did the dog die? Then all of a sudden, like, things start happening within the house that they can't really explain. It's getting cold in areas, even though the furnace is on. All of a sudden, all the posters get knocked off the wall randomly when the mom's home by herself, checking
yeah,
everything
the
out.
family photos.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, they're living in the middle of the living room, and that's where Ed and Lorraine come in, right?
Yeah,
That's where the really the like, they're like, we need your help. Crazy stuff is happening now. We can't explain it. Please help us. And then once Ed and Lorraine come in, it sort of peaks. Like, you have the slow, steady, 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 and then Ed and Lorraine come in, and it goes straight up. And then, of course, they figure it out, and then it comes back. That's
yeah.
what I was saying.
Well, like what's so interesting is they say, Ed and Lorraine Warren say, hey, we've got to get documentation, we've got to get proof because we need the Catholic Church to authorize exorcism. So they come in with, I guess, their assistant and then a police officer to help with the investigation. They set up the cameras, and this being the 70s, it's photo, like it's regular cameras. It's not a video camera. It's you know all this other technology. And like I remember like the one scene, because during the whole time before the Warrens get there, all the clocks stop at like what, 3:07.
Yep, that is right.
um and like the first night, like they're at the kitchen table and they're looking at a clock and the clock doesn't stop, it goes to 3:08. So it's kind of like the spirit knows what those people are doing there and doesn't want to give them evidence. And I think they don't start getting the evidence till like 2 or 3 nights later. So I mean, it's kind of like showing like, hey, yeah, no, the spirit knows what's going on and is trying not to give us proof.
Yeah. But then people start flying through the air.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, like one of the daughter that sleepwalks,
Yep.
starts sleepwalking, and like that's when everything just kind of
But that was a
ghost.
separate spirit, though. You gotta caveat that because like there was a little boy spirit there who was trying to protect the kids. So the girl who was sleepwalk, it was actually being guided by the little boy spirit to hide. So that way, like when this stuff started happening, she was sort of safe, right?
Yeah.
But at the same instance, you sort of can't really hide from stuff like that, like it, knows where you are essentially. Um, but there's a play on that, like why that happens, like why the kid is trying to protect them because he doesn't want the same thing to happen. Because it was like a, you know, I don't know, like a pilgrim child, like that's how he was dressed essentially. It was very very old timey.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say pilgrim. I'm thinking more like 1910s, 20s kind of
No, I felt like
Victorian.
I felt older than that, but
Yeah. But
I
either
mean either way.
way, yeah. Um, I think kind of one thing that, was kind of creepy after that is once they do finally decide to investigate the armoire, and because the daughter who sleepwalks eventually goes, no, wait, no, it's one of the younger daughters who has kind of become friends with the little boy ghost.
Yeah.
She disappears and finds out there's like a hidden room behind the armoire, and this little music box, jack in the box, whatever you want to call it, that the youngest girl's been playing with, that belonged to the boy spirit, was back in that room because there's like a perfectly clean outline of dust that is the shape of that music box. um
It
and
was
I
a
think,
hexagon.
yeah, and like that's kind of also another part for me when it got scary, because once they get the little girl out, Lorraine goes in, figures out that, okay, no, the little boy ghost used to hide in here when he was a human. Then the floorboards give out, she drops to the basement,
Hmm.
and she starts seeing what happened to the little boy, which is basically the mom killed him.
Yeah, but you
And
you didn't talk about the noose that she found in the
oh,
cemetery.
yeah. Yeah, she found the noose in the room. Like, she found a piece of rope and like pulled it to bring it up, and it was a noose. So like that's when it starts to ramp up, and then she falls and figures out what's going on. And like the whole time I'm like, something else is going to jump out. Something else is going to jump out. And I knew that the witch, like, because she hung herself. So like I knew there was going to be something with the noose. So like the jump point was seeing the witch's feet dangling in front of Lorraine, um, which kind of obviously added to the scare factor. And then Lorraine figuring out, no, what the witch does is possess the moms to kill the kids. And it's like, whoa, that's like kind of crazy. And then you got to figure out, okay, how, like, we got to wait for the church to give us the okay, but we can't really wait. And then we figure out that the mom has already been taken over by the witch.
Been possessed by the witch.
Yep.
So I mean, like my thought process though is like, even though it was a scary movie, like if you were to take all the elements of the scariness factor out, you would have watched it just because of those factors, because it was more like a historical, you know, I would hate to say documentary, but like, if all the jump scares were taken out, all the scary scenes, you would have been interested in the movie because of just the draw factor, like what happens and like the history and of the land and all of that stuff. It sounds like.
But I don't know if you'd have much of a story without the scary stuff, without the supernatural, the paranormal, the witch possessing the people. Like, you wouldn't really
Well,
have much of a story.
well, think about it this way though, because like this is how I think of the only difference between a scary movie and what we watch on the TV, the paranormal stuff, is the jump scares and those scary factors. Because like when we watch stuff on TV, there's not stuff that's jumping out at you. There's not like these crazy events that are like, oh my god, and you freaking out and screaming, right? It's like, oh yeah, that's cool. Because like I don't really watch paranormal shows for like being scary. I watch it for more of a historical, thing, because like they do go to these old places, and so that's why I watch those things, paranormal shows. But when I watch scary movies, like obviously I expect to get scared. I expect it to be, horror driven and like make me like what's going to happen next, and sort of thing. So that's why I'm saying like you could literally take those two things side by side, take one element out, and you'd probably still watch it because it would have those, it'd have that same draw essentially. Like you'd want to know
Yeah,
what's happening.
I mean, I guess I misunderstood what you're saying because I was thinking like you meant like everything that was scary about it, which includes like the witch cursing the land, like the origin of everything starting.
No, no.
So
So like I'm saying, like you keep all the paranormal stuff, like the witch haunting the land, and you keep all of that stuff. But you take out the scary parts where the witch jumped off of the armoire hidden cabinet door thing. The girls flying around and being dragged by their hair, and even the dog dying at the very beginning. Like if you take those elements out, like you'd still probably watch it because it draws you in enough to be like, oh yeah, this is still good.
yeah, I mean, it would be like a like you said, one of those paranormal investigation shows that we
Yeah.
watch on TV. So I mean, yeah, I mean, and that's probably why I, I don't want to say I like the movie because like I wouldn't be like I want to watch it all the time. Like but that's probably why I was more drawn in to this movie because it was similar to stuff that we already watch.
Yeah. I mean, you could like it though and still not want to watch it all the time. Like I think of it like Indian food. I like Indian food. I think Indian food's great. Do I want to eat it every single day? No, I would die because my stomach would kill me. It would be I'd end up being living in the bathroom sort of thing. But I like Indian food. Like I like it sort of thing. That's how I think of it. Like
Yeah.
that's why I think of horror movies like the same aspect. Like if you like it, it's okay to like it. Would you want to watch it every single day for the rest of your life? No, that's fine, but you can still like it, you know.
Yeah. I just feel like I shouldn't say I like something when it comes to horror movies with you because then you will get way too excited and happy and want to like watch stuff that is even scarier, if that makes sense. I don't want to give you the
Yeah,
satisfaction.
I understand that. Yeah, but like at the same instance, I feel like um I don't want to watch horror movies every single day, right? Like I like horror movies, I enjoy them, but it's not something that I want to do every single day of every single hour. And there are some people like that who like live and die by horror movies. I'm not that individual. Like I like them. I think they're good. I think they have great storytelling. I think the ethos and the myths within them are amazing. But at the same instance, like it's not like I have to have it. That's I go through these bouts where for a week straight or 2 weeks straight, I'll be like, I want to watch all the horror movies I haven't watched in like a couple years because, for whatever particular reason. But after that, like I might go a long time before I watch another horror movie or, anything else like that. But at the same instance though, like if something cool horror comes up like Scarowinds, like I'm gonna go do that. I want to go do that, sort of thing.
Yeah. Which I think that's kind of what prompted the whole I'll watch scary movies thing is going to Scarowinds and it being Halloween time, like we're getting into Halloween time. And um, one thing about me is I like to go to theme parks. So I mean, obviously, like Universal Orlando has Halloween Horror Nights, which I've talked to Thomas about several times, and keep saying 1 year I've got to take you, 1 year I've got to take you. even though it will probably scare me and I will scream and like cut off his circulation on his arm because I'm grabbing it so hard. Um, so like that's kind of what I feel like started all of this was the time of year and having all these scary haunted house stuff at the theme parks.
I mean, I sort of instigated it a little bit too, though, because we were at Spirit Halloween, and we were, pointing out the scary stuff, and I was sort of like, it's really weird that, and I know, I think we said this at the beginning, like, it's really weird that you like Halloween and this stuff, but yet you don't really like scary movies. It seems sort of like a little weird, you know. And you're sort of like, well, I mean, yeah, it's not the same. And I was sort of like, whatever. I mean, like, it was
Well,
just
no,
an
that's when I was
observation.
like, no, I don't like the bloody, gory stuff, but I'll watch some scary stuff. Like before we met, I've seen like the classic Halloween movies. Um, like I said, I watched Scream. Um, I've seen some scary movies.
Yeah.
And like I have no problem scaring people, but me being scared is like completely different story. But I think that's with anybody.
I don't know. I mean, like, I, it's one of those things where I feel like it's like anything else. Like, it's like an inoculation, right? The more you do something, the more you get sort of like the mundane factor about it, right? The more you scary movies you watch, the more sort of like blase, it's sort of like, not that big a deal. Unless it's like something crazy and over the top and never been done before, then you're sort of like, oh wow, like that's really good, and I was scared. But for the most part, like it seemed there's always like a formula behind it. Like if the camera's panning one way and there's nothing there, if the camera's panning back the other way, guaranteed there's going to be something there. It's
Yeah.
just which is fine. I mean, that's how it works, and it startles people and it scares them, especially like when they're like this, like the person's like up in their face, and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
But at the same instance, like you see 10 scary movies, and they're all like that, and you're sort of like you expect it. But where I feel like with The Conjuring, they didn't necessarily do that to a degree. Like they had elements of it, like when they were panning in and out with the children, and then the witch was on the um, armoire thing, or when the witch was hanging downstairs. Like right, she was like Lorraine was looking around, then all of a sudden she was looking one section, and then the witch dropped. All you saw was her feet, but then the witch's body started moving towards Lorraine while she was hanging, and Lorraine was like trying to crawl away from it. Like that, those elements were cool because it wasn't like something you expected before.
Yeah.
So, or even like when Lorraine was looking at the mirror, right? And most of the time you expect something to pop up within the mirror, and nothing popped up, but you can see the mom with the kid,
You're
and
talking about
they
the
were,
mirror in the music box.
yeah, the music box, yeah. And you could see the mom with the kid, um, from like you said 1910s or whatever, and she had a knife in her hand. And then the second she pulled down the mirror, the mom was like right there. That was sort of like a different take, because most of the time they pop up within the mirror. So
Yeah.
so there's elements that were extremely well done, which I'd say on a horror aspect is like, yeah, that's good. Like that scared you. Those things that you're not really expecting. So
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like I said, I mean, I'm not obviously a horror aficionado.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, even I was like, okay, yeah, something should be jumping out about now. The music's getting a little spooky. My blanket is creeping close to my face to cover it up. Like, I kind of expected things to happen at certain points, but then when like something extra would happen, it was like just extra scary to
yeah.
me.
So like my thought process, like you were expecting it to happen, it didn't happen, and you're sort of like, oh, okay. So you relax your guard a little bit, and then it turns around and it's like, boom, right there, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh shit, yeah. That's like the best way to do it though. Is like when it's like that aspect. My thought process is,
Yeah, you're the when you least expect it kind of thing.
yeah. So okay, three ghosts, so fairly scary. We talked about this your scariest scene. Um, enjoyed the universe for the most part. Uh, was drawn in. Would you recommend it as a first time watch for someone who's not into scary movies?
I don't feel like that's a flat yes or no, because just like you asked me a bunch of questions to figure out what to be the first movie for me to watch, was like, do you prefer old school or new school? Do you want slasher or psychological? Like, it depends on what that person is okay with starting out with. Like, I'm not okay with slasher flicks, but the next person might be like, you know what? The blood and guts don't bother me. The slasher's fine. So if they're like me and they're okay with like paranormal stuff and they're okay with like scary but not slasher, then yeah, I would probably say, hey, give this a shot as kind of your intro into it. But yeah, if they were opposite of me and be like, nope, I want the then yeah, no.
So if someone wanted to be scared though, say it was their first time watching a scary movie and they were like, I just want to be scared, I don't care, blood, guts, doesn't matter, anything, would you say, yeah, this is a good movie, you should watch this, it's scary, you'll get scared?
Didn't I just say yeah, depending on what they like?
Yeah, but I'm saying if they don't say anything, they say, I don't care about any of that stuff, I'm perfectly
Like
blase.
they have no reservations with anything. They'll watch anything scary.
Yep. And it's our first movie, first scary movie.
Yeah, because I mean, I feel like the other ones that we've watched so far, and like I said, we'll talk about them, on the next episode. But they're warmer jump factors, so it kind of came across a little scarier with the Nun 1 and 2. So yeah, I'd say like watch this one first, like how you did it,
Mhm.
instead of watching it in a storyline timeline. I think was better. Because I think if I watched the Nun 1 and 2 before the Conjuring, I might have like been like, yeah, I don't know, like let's try something else.
Yeah.
So I think the way you've done it so far is how I would recommend it for somebody else like me that's trying to maybe start watching them.
So the next movie we need to watch is The Conjuring 2, because that's where Ed and Lorraine essentially meet the nun. So we have to watch that one. And then I'm thinking, so once that ties up after The Conjuring 2, we will go to Annabelle Creation, which is the introduction of Annabelle, the scary doll, which you actually see. So that's a crazy thing is like, and I'm going to preface this, when you get introduced to The Conjuring, right? There's two stories that are being played out at the same time within The Conjuring that you're sort of like, what? Which is the nun and Annabelle. Well, I should say three stories because then they have this side story of with the witch, right? So the Conjuring movie itself is based on the witch aspect. Um, the other two, though, that you get introduced right at the very beginning is the nun, which you don't know that it's the nun yet because they haven't actually really talked a lot about it. Um, Essentially, at the very beginning, they show this film of Ed and Lorraine and a priest doing exorcist. or an exorcism, and they don't explain why they're doing the exorcism. Like 100%, they obviously he's possessed, but they don't explain like the steps leading up to that exorcism. Then they show Anne and Lorraine being interviewed by, or at the very beginning, they show them at this um, like college students nurse's house where Annabelle is there, which is the doll, and then they bring the doll back to their house and lock it up, and they talk more about Annabelle, right? But The Conjuring 2 introduces the nun more so because it's a direct sequel, obviously. But to get the nun's backstory, you have to watch the nun, and you have to watch the nun too. So the reason why we're watching it in this order is because you get the introduction of the characters. You get Ed and Lorraine, then you get Annabelle and the nun, right? Then you go back, you watch the nun, which gets the backstory of how the nun came into existence and what's going on with her. You watch the nun too, because that's more backstory and you figure more things out with what's going on. Then you watch The Conjuring 2 because that's when Ed and Lorraine face the nun in their year, because it's like 1974 or something, I think 1976 when they face the nun or come to face with her. Then you go back and watch Annabelle, so you get that backstory. Then you watch or Annabelle Creation, then I think it's Annabelle, and then there's like two other Annabelle movies, and I can't remember them off the top of my list, off my off of my head. And then you watch The Conjuring 3, which has nothing to do with any of them, and so that way you're all the stories are tied up. You understand everything that's going on with that universe, and then the last one you watch because it's completely separate. You don't have to worry about like remembering what happened in all these other movies and who's what and who's who, and it's like perfectly tied up and neat and organized and all that stuff. And then supposedly we looked at it, or I looked it up, and they're going to be doing a Conjuring 4 movie and a Conjuring TV show, which seems interesting. So we'll have to do more research on that.
Yeah. And I do have to admit, watching Annabelle is probably the one that I am the most hesitant to watch. Just because the creepy doll factor.
Yeah,
So
I
not
agree
looking
though.
for yeah, I mean I'm not looking forward to watching those, but I feel like I've kind of put myself into the situation and I gotta see myself out. Um so yeah, I mean, so here we are. We've talked about an hour, talked about the Conjuring. Next episode we'll talk about the Nun 1 and 2. If anybody wants to watch these, the Conjuring and the Nun 1 are on streaming services. The Nun
HBO
2,
Max,
HBO Max, okay. um or it's now just Max, should we say.
Max, the
uh
Max.
um and then of course the Nun 2 is in theaters. It's been out for what, like 2 or 3 weeks.
I think so. I can't
So
remember.
um that way, if you guys kind of want to have them fresh in your head when you listen to the next episode, that's our schedule of events as of right now. Um, that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed our very first episode of Love and Movies. Um,
Me droning on and on.
you droning on and on. Which,
Just
hey, when we get into movies that are more my vibe, I'll probably be droning on and on. So we're just going to take turns. And like I said in the beginning, it's just going to be kind of like a cool dynamic because we're a couple, we have different movie preferences, and how watching these movies together impacts us as individuals, us as a couple, and just the pure entertainment factor of it all.
so I think before we leave, because obviously the title of this is Love and Movies, we should talk about the couple factor, right? Because obviously you would not watch these movies by yourself, right? You'd
Oh no,
obviously,
no, no.
yeah. So
Or should I say hell no?
yeah, yeah. Obviously, with me being there as a couple thing, was it? Would you say it was obviously a lot better compared to, like, say, if you saw it with a friend or family members, other family members? Like, was that? Would you consider that a good bonding experience, a good couple relationship experience, watching something that is not a top thrill for you?
I mean, I think it was good for us to watch it. There's no way anybody else would get me to watch those movies. Like one thing about relationships, and I think one thing is going to kind of be like a running theme with this venture that we're doing is compromise. I mean, you're going to watch movies that you don't want to watch, and I'm going to watch movies I don't want to watch.
My Big Fat Greek
Um,
Wedding 3.
which we'll talk about those at another time. Um,
We did watch that, by the way. That's why I
yeah.
brought that up.
Um, so I mean, just the simple fact of like me just even agreeing to watch them and watch them with you, I think says a lot. I felt safer and more comfortable having you beside me. One good thing about you, especially with The Conjuring and Nun One, since you've seen them before, is you knew if it was about to maybe get a little like little bloody or a little too much, you'd be like, okay, close your eyes or put the blanket over your head. Like you kind of warned me, which was good. Um, which obviously like a friend or family member would not do that. They would just kind of let me be scared and get an entertainment joy out of it, like kind of laugh. So that's like probably the best thing is you got my back,
Hmm.
when it comes to the scary movies. You make sure like if you know I'm gonna like really be freaked out, you warn me ahead of time.
Yeah. And I also want to make sure people understand, like, I did not put any pressure on Morgan to do this. I did not like twist her arm or anything of that nature. This was just a general, conversation piece. And she actually brought it up because I don't remember what I was doing. I was flicking through horror movies like I normally do just to see what was out. And then I was going to put something else on. And then you're like, well, if you want to watch a horror movie, we can watch a horror movie. And I was like, what do you mean by we? And she's like, well, I'll watch it with you. Just, make sure it's nothing, gory, bloody, crazy. And I was sort of like giddy. I was like, wait, what? We get to watch a horror movie?
Well,
Like.
I like that's how you remember it because I remember it as basically like, okay, we can watch a scary movie, like kind of
Oh,
like I give up, like just let's just watch it, like
well,
but I mean like no, you didn't pressure me, you didn't make me watch anything. I think that's one good thing about our relationship is we don't make each other do anything. Well, to an extent. I mean, like I'm gonna, make you wash the dishes every once in a while, like things like that. Um,
okay.
but yeah, I mean, like if it's something the other really doesn't want to watch, we're not gonna force each other to watch it.
Yeah. So,
So
but I did want to make sure that people understood that. Like, this is not one of those things where, like, you need to be forcing the other person. Like, respect the other person's wishes. If they don't want to watch something, don't try and force them to. Have conversations about it. Like, because that's all we did is we had conversations about it. Like, I would talk about, you know, scary movies, and my little sister would watch scary movies with me when she comes over occasionally. And when I mean little, I mean like little sister. She's like 14 now. So,
yeah,
like,
she's not 5.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
she's old enough that it's kind of okay to watch them. Um, we don't have a 5-year-old watching Saw or anything like that. But I
Yeah.
mean, like back to like just us as far as a relationship though, like um we if you would have asked me like the beginning of our relationship to watch The Conjuring, I would have been like, no. So I think also like one good thing is how long we've been together also played a factor into me be like, okay, I'll watch the scary movies. I'll, you know, you know, do this because like it's not just oh yes, watching scary movies, but it's also like learning another aspect of you as a person,
Yeah,
which is important in a relationship is to always like know each other better.
of course. And I mean, like, I agree that my actions also allowed you to be more comfortable with saying yes, right? So, like, if I would have been like every other month for the 5 years we've been essentially together, be like, hey, let's watch a scary movie. Hey, let's watch a scary movie. Hey, let's watch a scary movie. You would have probably been like, no, 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 no. Like for the 5 years we've been together. I don't think I've ever said within the last 5 years, like, hey, let's watch a scary movie. Like anytime you want to watch something scary or remotely scary, you're the one who brings it up. Like you're like, hey, let's watch some paranormal stuff, and I'm like, all right, sure, that's cool, we can do that. Or like, like now in this instance, you're like, like, oh yeah, like I think I can watch a scary movie, and let's give me some suggestions, and what do you think, would be decent to start off with, and of course,
Yeah, because
you know,
it's a comfort, it's a comfort level. It's for me it's a safety level. Like
mhm.
I feel safe enough to watch them with you, which like makes it sound like I think I'm going to be in some kind of danger watching a scary movie, but I feel like anytime somebody goes into a situation where they're being scared, it's always good to have somebody you feel safe with, regardless if it's just watching a movie or walking into a haunted house or anything like that. So I think just the simple fact of like, we're comfortable enough with each other, we've been together long enough, we know each other well enough that I feel safe enough to watch them is kind of where we're at.
Which is good, and I think that is actually a perfect place to truly end it. So
Yep.
thank you for listening. If you have listened to the podcast, if you have any suggestions on movies, it doesn't have to be horror movies, it can be any type of movies that you think we'll like. You can email it to us. And honestly, if we've seen it before, we'll watch it again and do a podcast on it, just so that way, you know, we can get it out there, because we have no set plans with this podcast. All we know is we're going to watch movies and talk about as a couple how it makes us, either a stronger couple, or like whether we'll watch that as a couple ever again, sort of thing.
Yeah. And obviously like the movies are going to affect us differently, so that's another good thing. Like Thomas said, if you guys have any questions, email us, and it is love and movies pod at gmail. We are going to set up at least an Instagram, maybe Facebook. We'll see how it goes, but we'll definitely post it or announce it on our next episode what socials we have up. We'd love to hear from you guys. So feel free to shoot us an email. Feel free to like the episode and follow us wherever you are listening to this episode. And we're planning on doing this about once a week. So we will see you guys next week.
Bye bye now.